In this chapter, we learn that payroll is the function of a business paying its employee. It includes distributing money in the form of check and direct deposit. It also includes keeping record on those payments and paying tax on behalf of those employees. A business may refer to payroll as shorthand for its total workforce or the cost of that workforce. The conclusion is we learn that basic business activity and data processing operations that are performed in the payroll, and it include recruiting, assigning, compensating, evaluating, and discharging employees. You will also learn about the major traits that present themselves in the payroll cycle and the control that can be exercised to mitigate those traits. In this chapter, we learn that payroll is the function of a business paying its employee. It includes distributing money in the form of check and direct deposit. It also includes keeping record on those payments and paying tax on behalf of those employees. A business may refer to payroll as shorthand for its total workforce or the cost of that workforce.
My name is Nur Syahira Nabila binti Fazali, and I'm going to talk about the objective of payroll and personal cycle. The first is identify the accounts and transactions in the payroll and personal cycle. Second, describe the business functions and the related documents and records in the payroll and personal cycle. Third, understand internal control and design and perform tests of controls and substantive tests of transaction for the payroll and personal cycle. Fourth, design and perform analytical procedures for the payroll and personal cycle. The last one is design and perform tests of details of balances for accounts in the payroll and personal cycle. Next is overview of payroll and personal cycle. The overall objective in the audit of the payroll and personal cycle is to evaluate whether the account balances affected by the cycle are fairly stated in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles or GAAP. Next, we have payroll transactions. Below are the general accounts used in payroll cycle. Obviously, we use cash or bank to make payments. First is primary journal entry being summary level entry that is compiled from wages control. That includes wages, salaries, bonuses and commissions which are generated from direct or indirect labor, and provision annual leave. We also have deduction, which is liability accounts, for example, mandatory provident fund or EPF. There may be a number of additional employee deductions to include in this journal entry. For example, deductions for pension plans, health insurance or life insurance. These are amounts withheld from employees' pay that have to be remitted from gross salaries to various government or other agencies. After all of these deductions made previously from gross salaries account, the employees finally have their net salaries.
Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Fitri Farhana binti Fakhruzi. In today's video, I'm gonna explain to you guys about documents and activities in payroll cycle. The first one is personal file. This file includes the application for employment and records which are used or have been used to determine on employees' qualification for promotion, compensation, and termination. Employer use personal records to keep track of the employment relationship. Not everyone have the access to the personal file. Only human resources staff and the employee's immediate supervisor or manager may have access to the information. So, if you are one of the workers, You don't need to get worried about your information being leaked while you work there. Second is deduction authorization form. Payroll deduction are amount withheld from an employee's payroll check, and this amount are withheld by their employer. Among these deductions are insurance pension contribution, child support payments, taxes, and many more. As you guys can see, I already put an example of the form so that you guys can see how it works. Third is time card. It is used to record time when employees start and stop work during a pay period. Information on time and attendance come in various forms depending on the employee's pay scheme. Some employees are paid on an hourly basis. Many companies use time card while others use electronic time clock. Manufacturing companies may use job time tickets to record not only time present but also time dedicated to each job. Some employees earn a fixed salary, such as managers and professional staff. These employees usually don't record their time, but supervisor will informally monitor their presence. Fourth is payroll check. A payroll check refers to a check written to an employee regarding a set amount of hours the employee has worked for. Paychecks are printed for employees, often accompanied by an earnings statement which lists all the pay details from current and year to date. Lastly is payroll register. The payroll register lists each employee's gross pay, deduction, and net pay in a multi-column format. The payroll register is used to authorize the transfer of funds to the company's payroll bank account. As payroll transactions are processed, labor costs are accumulated by general ledger account based on codes on the job time ticket. The total for each account are used as the basis for a summary journal entry to be posted to the general ledger.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Shamim Akmal bin Alias, and that is a picture of my face. And now I want to continue to further explain about the 6th document in the payroll cycle. For the 6th document, it is an employee earnings record. An employee earnings record is to record the details of an employee's pay for a whole financial year. The progression is made easier by totaling the columns on the card, instead of having to refer to the payroll register for each pay period to verify how much each employee has been paid. This is an example of employee earning record for the name of Ellie Murder. You can see there is a period ended, hours work, and the gross pay. There is a lot of columns, and it's easier to totaling the columns on the card. For the next document is a labor distribution summary. A labor distribution summary is to prepare a summary identifying the gross factory earnings for the various account classifications, for example, by product or by division. As you can see, there is an example of labor distribution summary. You can see a column of earnings there. Payroll tax return. A payroll tax return is to prepare tax form for submission to the relevant government agency or taxation office. This is an example of payroll tax return template. A group certificate. A group certificate is to be given to an employee for filing with Malaysia, showing annual earnings, NPF, contribution withheld, and other deductions authorized by the employee, including superannuation and union dues. This is an example of group certificate for an employee. You can see there is an earning, basic pay, house rent, utility, vacation, and there is also a total deduction. It's a control card. A control card document is to show the total payroll for the period. At the end of each pay period, the employee earnings record cards are totaled and reconciled with the control card. This control measure is similar to that one of the control account or subsidiary ledger. This is an example of control card. There is a lot of template for a control card, but this is one of them. That is all for the 10 document in the payroll cycle. Thank you for watching.
Hi, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Ali Faikal bin Muhammad and my name is Muhammad Adi Anas bin Alias. Today we want to talk about payroll and personal sector. Our part is internal control objective and specific control policy. There are 5 main points in the internal control objective. The first one, the occurrence. The second one is completeness. The third one is accuracy. The fourth one is cut-off. And the last one is classification. Okay, let's move to the first internal control objective, which is occurrence. Occurrence means recorded payroll transactions are for services actually performed by non-fictitious employees. There should be segmentation of duties of personnel, timekeeping, and payroll payments. Payroll transactions are property of firms. There should be procedures for proper authorization and approvals by the personnel department for hiring and terminating employees or for changes in employee status. Time cards should be approved by supervisors and approved time cards are compared with absentee reports. There should be internal verification comparing payroll with termination lists. We move to the second internal control objective. There is completeness. Completeness can be defined as all payroll transactions are properly recorded. The specific procedure is payroll check should be pre-numbered and accounted. An independent employee should reconcile the payroll bank account. Okay, the third internal control objective is accuracy. It means payroll transactions are recorded at the proper amount. For the specific procedure, there should be internal verification entries, including the review of approved rates and time cards. The gross net payroll amount and payroll total should be independently recalculated. The fourth one is cut-off. It means by the payroll transactions are recorded in the correct counting period. For specific procedures, there should be procedures for credit on payroll checks and entry date in payroll register. Okay, the last one is classifications. It means payroll transactions are recorded in proper accounts. The procedure for classifying payroll costs should be reviewed. That's all from us. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nur Harisa binti Husni and I will explain about preliminary assessment of control risk in payroll cycle, atau maksudnya penilaian awal terhadap risiko kawalan di dalam payroll cycle. There are 3 tools in this preliminary assessment, which is firstly we have internal control questionnaires, we have flowchart and narrative on the internal control structures. First, internal control questionnaires is a process for measuring of an organization's objective in operational effectiveness and efficiency, reliable financial reporting, and compliance with laws, regulations, and policies. Next, we have flowchart. Flowchart is a type of diagram that represent a workflow or process. Basically, flowchart ni flowchart yang biasa kita nampak, cuma ianya lebih spesifik terhadap proses yang ada di dalam payroll cycle. Last, we have narrative on the internal control structures, which is this tool will help us to protect our assets from theft and waste, to ensure compliance with company policies and federal law, and evaluate performance to promote efficient operations. This is the example of flowchart. In the payroll process, which is we have human resources that will go to the employee and will go to the manager, to the payroll, and lastly to the payroll vendor. That's all from me. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nurina Shona. I will present to you test of control. Common audit procedures: observation, inquiry, inspection of document, and reperformance. A random transaction sample that is typically selected for control tests. This happens because payroll transfer can be very lengthy and systematic. Auditors typically use convincing audit evidence when checking payroll rather than substantive procedure since it is internally produced. Audit objective of test control: occurrence. All recorded payroll transactions have currently taken their place. Completeness. It handles and tracks all payroll transactions. Accuracy. Internal assurance entry, including a review of accepted rate and a timeline, should be submitted. Cut-off. Compare the payroll check, paste date, and entry date in the payroll registry. Classification. Procedure should be checked to identify payroll costs.
Review of preliminary assessment of control risk. The purpose of test of control is to evaluate the effectiveness of design and operation of the internal control structure, policy, and procedure. In return, it helps the auditor in determining the assessed level of control risk for accession of revenue and receipt cycle. For instance, if the evaluation of deviation from the prescribed control that based on test of control for transaction involving sales and cash received, which show that such deviation arise as a result of a control failure, the auditor may conclude that specific internal control may be less reliant than is expected. As a result, for those financial report accession to which they related, the assessed level of control risk should be increased, and the auditor would later modify the nature, timing, and extent of the planned substantive procedure to be performed.
Now I will explain about substantive test under payroll circle. Substantive test is an audit procedure that examines the financial statement and supporting documentation to see if there is any error. There are 8 common audit procedures. Consists of physical inspection, reperformance, inspection of documents, observation, confirmation, recalculation, inquiry, and analytical procedures. Let's go through one by one. Confirmation. A confirmation response represents a particular form of audit evidence obtained by the auditor from a third party. For reperformance, it involves the independent execution by the auditor of procedures or controls that were originally performed as part of the entity's internal control. Next, inquiry. Inquiry consists of seeking information from knowledgeable persons in financial or non-financial roles within the company or outside the company. Inquiry may be performed throughout the audit in addition to other audit procedures. Inquiries may range from formal written inquiries to informal oral inquiries. Next is physical inspection. It is an audit procedure based on physically examining an asset. Similarly, the inspection of tangible assets may provide reliable audit evidence about their existence, but not about the entity's rights and obligations or the valuation of the asset. For recalculation consists of checking the mathematical accuracy of documents or records, and that can be used to verify the accuracy of the recording of transactions or the application of accounting policies. For example, recalculating depreciation of tangible assets. However, recalculation does not provide evidence of the accuracy of the estimated rate of depreciation charge in relation to each class of asset. Next observation, it is an audit procedure that consists of looking at a process or procedure being performed by others so that the evidence about the actual performance is obtained. However, observation provides evidence that is limited to the point in time when it takes place, and by the fact that being observed may influence how the process or procedure is performed on such occasion. For example, the auditor's attendance at the inventory counting by the entity staff and observing the performance of control activities. Next is inspection of documents. The inspection of documents provide audit evidence whose reliability depends on their nature and source. Inspecting certain documents may provide direct audit evidence of the existence of an asset. For instance, financial instruments like a share or a bond where the document itself constitutes the asset. Next is analytical procedures. Analytical procedures involve evaluations of financial information through analysis of reasonable relationships among both financial and non-financial data. They also include investigation of fluctuations and relationships that are inconsistent with other relevant information or that differ from expected values by a significant amount. Substantive analytical procedures are generally more applicable to large volumes of transactions that tend to be predictable over time. For instance, if an entity has a stable number of employees at fixed rates of wages during a period, then the auditor may estimate the total payroll cost for the period with a high level of accuracy. Next is types of substantive tests. There are two types, which are tests of details, transaction or balance, and analytical procedures, also known as reasonableness tests. Substantive test of transaction is for errors or fraud. Test of details of balances consider the closing balances in the general ledger. For example, an auditor may examine a large purchase of inventory by testing that the cost of the goods included on the invoice is properly recorded in the inventory and accounts payable. For analytical procedures or reasonableness test, it is an auditing procedure that examines the validity of accounting information. For example, an auditor could compare a reported ending inventory balance to the amount of storage space in a company's warehouse. Another reasonableness test is to compare a company's gross margin percentage to the same percentage for other companies in the same industry. So that's all under substantive tests, which are common audit procedures, and two types of substantive tests.
Hi, my name is Nur Shamimi Nabila binti Muhammad Noor, and I will explain about the theory question for personal and payroll cycle. In January 2018, question 5A, They ask about two internal control objectives related to the payroll and personal cycle. The first internal control objective is cut off. Payroll transactions are recorded in the correct accounting period. For example, there should be procedures to compare dates on the payroll check and entry dates in the payroll register. The second internal control objective is all payroll transactions are properly recorded. And for example, payroll checks should be pre-numbered and accounted. And also, an independent employee should reconcile the payroll bank account. Next, in December 2019, question 5A, explain any two audit procedures that the auditor may use to test whether the control is functioning. The first audit procedure is pre-performance. Auditor may initiate a new transaction to see which controls are used by the client and the effectiveness of those controls. The second audit procedure is inspection. Auditor may examine business document for approval signature, stamp, or review check mark, which indicate that the control have been performed. That's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nurul Izzati binti Zamzuri and I'm from group 5O. In this video, I would like to explain about the past year question for payroll cycle. For the past year question, I choose January 2018 question 5B. In this question, you are required to find 5 major weaknesses of internal control system for Diana Shalit Resort. From my observation, the 5 weaknesses of this organization are: first one, the head of department will sign the appointment letter. Second, the staff will be requested verbally to work extra hours. Third one, the overtime sheets are sent to the payroll department. Next, no verification are done for overtime working by staff. And lastly, payslip will only be generated once requested by the staff. So this is the question. A. Discuss any 5 major weaknesses in the internal control system. B. Explain the possible effect of each weakness identified above. C. Suggest a recommendation to overcome each weakness noted above. Present your answer in the following format. So you need to answer the question using table. For the solution, first weakness, the head of department will sign the appointment letter. The possible effect is there will be no proper classification for duties of personnel, timekeeping, and payroll payment because it should be done by personnel department. For the recommendation, there should be a proper segregation for those duties, the personnel department responsible to carry out such duties. Second weakness is staff will be requested verbally by their supervisor to work extra hours as overtime. Sometimes, if staff's overtime did not record and just verbal instruction, it could affect the total amount of their actual payment. Because of that, staff overtime should be recorded in data rather than verbal order so they can have permanent record. Third one is the overtime sheet are sent to payroll department. The effect is the organization will not effectively and efficiently operated as the overtime sheets should be approved by supervisor. For the recommendation, the supervisor should approve it, which is the right department to do this transaction. Next, no verification are done for the calculation of the staff overtime. Because of that, there will be no completeness and accuracy in recording transaction. To overcome it, there should be internal verification entries including review of approved rates and time card. Last weakness is payslip will only be generated once requested by staff. If there is no request by staff, the transaction will not correctly recorded. For the recommendation, it is the duties of the payroll department to generate the payslip to all staff. The payroll system should be reviewed.
The conclusion is We learned that basic business activity and data processing operations that are performed in the payroll, and it include recruiting, assigning, compensating, evaluating, and discharging employees. You will also learn about the major traits that present themselves in the payroll cycle and the control that can be incited to mitigate those traits.